Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests, welcome. My name is Wayne Thompson, as Ron mentioned then, and I'm a director of Avlaw International, which is a company about to embark upon a great journey this evening under the auspices of your chairperson for today and our chairman of Avlaw International, Ron Barch. I have the honour of introducing to you our distinguished guest, Mr. Lim Kim Hai, in a moment, who will in turn introduce you back to Ron for the official opening of Avlaw International. After these formalities, we will adjourn to the outside, just outside the doors, and we invite you to partake of some fermented beverages or whatever you wish at that time. But before I do, I just want to take a moment and reflect upon the personal space of Ron, as I've known Ron for 42 years, which is a bit of a lifetime for us at our young age, Ron, and thus I have the liberty, I believe, to reveal some secrets behind the man that had a vision which is now reality. We met all those years ago in a Sydney suburban scout hall, of all things, in a scout troop called 2nd Elwood. And I believe therein started and commenced Ron's unsurpassed discipline and a business acumen based upon truth and respect. Growing up with Ron was, to say the very least, diverse and exciting. Not many people know that Ron is an accomplished musician, and thus in the late 70s, we formed a band to take on the Australian music scene. Many bands evolved over the next 2 decades, but as you would probably realise, being here this evening, long hair and sequin jumpsuits didn't cut it for 20 years. Discos and DJs took over the live music scene in Australia. Nevertheless, throughout these heady days of rock and roll, Ron had to find his path into aviation and embarked upon a journey of education in a variety of disciplines. The path was always clear to Ron, having inherited an aviation pedigree from his father Joe, who served with distinction in the Royal Australian Air Force during World War II and later with Qantas. Of particular note is Ron's father flew the first commercial flight into Singapore after the war, and my father was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross during a Catalina mission to liberate Singapore at that time. I therefore believe it is fate that draws Ron to Singapore for this most respected aviation industry conference and to launch the pinnacle of his business tonight. We have had many philosophical discussions over the years about where all this will end, with a bottle or two of fine red wine prompting intellect, as some of you may imagine. Ron's response to this question is, Wayne, this is just the beginning. In the words of John Lennon, above us only sky. Now, getting back to the business, well, thank you for allowing me to diverse a little bit there from a personal perspective, but getting back to the business end of the deal, our distinguished guest and great supporter of Ron, Mr. Lim, started his career as a defence engineer specialist in underwater warfare. After 10 years, he started his own business. Mr. Lim currently has a portfolio of investment and business interests in diverse sectors and countries. He is chairman of a biomedical company in Singapore, Link Biotechnics, as well as chairman of Will World, a supplier of mobile games and content to telecommunication companies in Japan and Southeast Asia. Mr. Lim has a master's in electronics engineering, public administration and business administration from prestigious colleges in France and the National University of Singapore. He is the founding shareholder and director of Regional Express and holds the position of executive chairman of the board through re-elections in 2003, 6, 9 and 12. Regional Express is Australia's largest independent regional airline with 50 operational Saab 340 aircraft. In August of this year, they carried 93,000 passengers. There is no surprise that Regional Express is consistently ranked top 2 in the domestic airlines customer satisfaction survey when you consider that the company's business ethics include partnering in the bush, keeping fares affordable, being on time, servicing with our heart. Industry accolades over the years have placed Regional Express upon a pedestal with few others. No doubt Mr. Lim would like to mention something about their financial accolades when he comes up on stage. But from the industry perspective, in 2010, Rex was conferred as the Regional Airline of the Year, recognising a superior safety record, operational excellence, and praising its outstanding customer service. Aviation Week recognised them as the top performing regional airline from 2009 to 2013. Kappa Aviation awarded them Regional Airline of the Year in 2007, 08 and 2010, all being an obvious reflection of the board under the auspices of their Executive Chairman, Mr. Lim Kim Hai. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage our most esteemed and distinguished guest, Mr. Lim Kim Hai.
Thanks, Wayne. Very warm afternoon to all of you. You must all be very tired, so I will keep it very quick. Wayne has already largely introduced Ron. I myself, I've only known Ron for about 11 years. And I must say that under circumstances that were really a little bit stressful for me. At that time, it was just after the NSET collapsed, and I was stupid enough to want to invest in one of the regional airlines that belonged to NSET. So together with a group of other stupid shareholders, we went ahead and purchased 2 regional airlines from NSET and merged it into Regional Express. And those were the days when Ron was the manager of airline operations of CASA, which is the Civil Aviation Regulatory Authority in Australia. And of course, straight after NSET collapsed, everything is viewed with very deep suspicion by CASA, especially given that Regional Express is now under part control by this very strange Chinese. Obviously, CASA was very worried. It was quite difficult in the beginning to deal with CASA, and I can understand why. But I remarked to my colleagues at that time that I found Ron very unusual. And that's because I didn't know that he was a rock and roll kind of rocker, but I found that he actually understood the business aspect of aviation. And I think in the same case as lawyers, very often the specialists just understand their technical portfolio, and they don't really understand that all this actually has to work in a real environment. But I noticed that Ron actually understood that he is not there to only ensure compliance. I think since then we had a lot of discussions on, whether compliance is really all that important, but Ron understood that his mission is actually safety, it's not compliance. And those of you who are in the business understands that compliance and safety do not necessarily equate to each other. You can be a very compliant airline and you may not be necessarily safe. Vice versa, you may breach some areas of compliance without necessarily putting any aspect of safety into jeopardy, because essentially compliance are rules, and some of the rules obviously do not make sense. So I was very, very impressed with Ron at that stage, and I remember remarking to my colleagues. And it was a bit of a regret to see Ron leaving CASA after a couple of years when I knew him, to go on to Qantas to be the head of their safety and regulatory affairs. And I told my colleagues then that, Ron is too good for CASA then, and I could understand why he went on to work with Qantas. Since 12 years ago, as Wayne has pointed out, Rex, or Regional Express, has made progress. And we are now a company that is very well on our feet. We are very established in Australia. I think we are fairly respected in Australia. And financially, I think we are doing fairly okay. It gives me great pleasure to brag, especially to Alan Joyce, every time I see him, that for the past 2 years, every one of the past 2 years, Rex has made more money in absolute, more than Qantas and Virgin Australia combined for the last 2 years, so that's not too bad. Obviously, that shows how bad the other airlines are, but still, I'd like to brag to them that. And similarly, Ron's progression in his career has been even more astounding. As I said earlier, he went on to join Qantas, but Qantas probably is a place that sort of stifles him too much. And so I think by 2009, he decided to leave Qantas to set up his own aviation law consulting firm known as Avlaw. I suppose it's short for aviation law. And in those few years since then, Ron has made tremendous progress and built a huge reputation for his company. And I'm just amazed to see how quickly he has progressed in a few years since 2009 to build up a whole business that centers around providing consultancy services on the legal aspects and the regulatory aspects of civil aviation. And of course, Australia is too small to contain him, and he has this vision to replicate his tremendous success in Australia all over the, I suppose, the Asia-Pacific basin. And therefore, he is now launching this Avlaw International project, whereby a whole series of countries with specialists and consultants in every country are all part of a franchise that can provide good, very reputable, and very experienced legal and regulatory advice. I forgot to mention to you that Ron has also written two, I think at least two, volumes of legal books, and he has not failed to present them to me, and they are sitting very proudly on my table as a kind of a table weight, as a bookmark. And so Ron is an expert in this field, and I would like to, it gives me great pleasure to present to you Ron Bartsch,